ReferKent network. So I'll be doing a bit of an introduction just to start off with, but then I'll be going into kind of updates around the Green Doctor project and how we've changed basically some of our schedules for the upcoming winter. So Green Doctors are an energy and fuel charity, which gives advice to homeowners, renters, housing association tenants, and temporary accommodation tenants all across Kent and Medway. Our team has been running for about 5 years, but the actual Green Doctor projects have been running for about 19 years now, starting in London. It came to fruition because we realised that there was really a need for a lot of kind of impartial advice after the energy crisis hit us very hard a couple of years ago. So to highlight our service, we are... Sorry, is there a question? Sorry, just I want to make sure I'm not speaking over someone. Pardon me. To highlight our service is free, so anyone who wants to engage with us basically can do. It doesn't matter on their tenure, as I've mentioned, and we don't really take into consideration income either, because we know that paying for energy can be very difficult for all types of families, all types of residents. So to think about those who are most likely to benefit from our service, we look at like the triangle essentially of fuel poverty, which is high energy costs, a house that doesn't hold the heat very well, and someone on low income. But it's very flexible definition, and we try not to use the kind of terminology fuel poverty anymore because it can be misleading for some people, and there is a little bit of stigma there. But essentially what we're trying to say is that anybody who pays kind of like more than 10% of their energy of their income to their energy bills is likely to be able to benefit from a bit of advice. So we tend to visit people in their properties because we like to be able to see kind of the heating systems, the setup of the house, the age of the house, and essentially habits in person, because some of these things you can glean online and through conversations with people over the telephone, but we're trying to kind of change habits and make sure that people are taking into considerations their actions that can affect their bills and their comfort. So we like to do that in the home, just to walk through the house really. So we kind of like say it's a bit of an energy audit essentially. And the things that we like to take a little look at basically is the signs of the age of the home, like I mentioned. Is there good maintenance in the house? Some signs might be like if there's single glazed windows, are there signs of damp, condensation? People who are in all electric homes can sometimes have slightly different setup for their heating, so they might pay high bills. Is there no gas at all to the supply? So for example, are they using storage heaters? Is it in a flat? Is it an old gas boiler? Is it an old heating system in general? Sometimes people are interested in like renewable technology, which is something we can cover and see what's appropriate for the house, and also how to fund that, which I'll go into detail about later. But another thing to consider is that there are certain residents who might be more vulnerable than others. This can be a temporary thing as well. For certain people, it could be due to age, so young children, for example, those who have a disability or a temporary sickness, those who have a lack of knowledge, because obviously sometimes we move into a new property and you might never have had to deal with your energy or the bills before. It might be like, for example, there's somebody who's divorced and they're taking over the bills. So I've given quite a few examples there, but the list is endless. So we will take referrals from anyone, including professionals. So please do keep an eye out for the link at the end, which I'll be able to send to you all. But it's really important for us to be able to get to know people in other professional services, because oftentimes when we're meeting people one-to-one, we'll each cover topics that aren't really our expertise. We likewise have the same, which is what we use ReferKent for, little shout out there. So if it's something that's not energy, we will then make sure we're reaching out to the right people through signposting and gentle guidance. But if you're ever thinking you want someone to look into energy from their point of view, expert, obviously us as the Green Doctors can help with that. But some of the signifiers for fuel poverty aren't always verbal. People can't always identify themselves as having an issue. So one thing to think about if you're talking to someone, or even if you do happen to visit the home yourself, is the house cold and drafty? Do you notice that there are cold spots in the home? Is somebody using a single point heater rather than turning on their central heating? Potentially there's a bit of fear around turning on the heating because of the costs. Are they just heating that one room? You can notice a lot of the living is going on in, for example, the lounge, where you might have children doing homework, a parent who might be cooking close to the living room, somebody who's watching TV. So if you notice that they're sticking to the one room because they're trying to heat that only, that can sometimes be a sign that we can step in and make it more comfortable throughout the whole house. People who are wearing blankets indoors and coats, outdoor coats indoors, that can obviously be a sign that they're feeling chilly. Prepayment meters, or traditional top-up meters, they're sometimes called, have historically been more difficult to fund. Things around that have changed nowadays, and it's a little bit more fairer. But a prepayment meter sometimes means someone's paying off a debt at the same time as using credit to pay off energy they're about to use. So that means that their money doesn't stretch as far. Obviously, physical signs, like I said, damp and mold, you can see those quite obviously. But then you're moving into people's kind of well-being and their reactions to guests as well. Sometimes there's an element of pride. People don't want visitors to the home, or they'll put the heating on for a short time just to take the chill off so that while someone's there, but then very quickly will turn it off again once they're kind of on their own. Same with hot water, that can sometimes be turned off. And then the other thing to think about is just things like respiratory illnesses, asthmas and colds, children who have runny noses more often than is usual. Things like that might be good signs for you guys as professionals to think about a referral to the green doctors. So again, just to continue with the introduction of the team, essentially what we try to do is help people in a really holistic way throughout their energy kind of experience, because sometimes issues aren't about the physicality of the home. They can be more to do with the supplier, the tariff, and explaining bills. So what we do is we will do like an initial visit with this person to be able to determine the things that we should concentrate on. And if it's complex, we of course can take that on as a case study as well. And for example, we might help clients with understanding the heating system. So we'll go through literally point zero, explaining how the boiler works, how to set it up and program it appropriately, explaining the statements. So what are they showing of the usage? What's going to change by habits, so the usage costs, and what is essentially a non-negotiable. So that's more like a standing charge. We can go through and have a little look at the see if there's any better tariffs available for that supplier with the supplier they're with, or competition as well. Obviously, I've mentioned habits already, but that is very much to do with practicality of the home, looking at the appliances that they're using. Do they understand eco settings? Are they making sure that their radiators are bled? Have they got gaps away from the radiators to get the heat into the room? Things like that. As we do a walk around the house, you'll notice there's little tweaks you can make just to improve your comfort mainly. And over time, as you add up kind of more of the practical habits, you can then notice that on the monthly or quarterly bill. Obviously, a big one with fuel poverty. Again, it's not a nice term, but it is worth basically bringing up with professionals. The main reason why it's so important is because a lot of people have admitted to turning off their heating completely, or going without food so they can afford their heating, and vice versa. That is something that we are trying to make sure doesn't have to happen. So when we're looking at the heating sources and the food sources, we can make guidance and essentially talk to people about their options for accessing either better products or how to use the ones they already have in a more productive way. This obviously comes with some caveats, which I will talk about later, because if people own their home, it's slightly different from if they're renting. But we make sure that there's a lot of safety involved as well. So for example, where anyone's using a gas boiler or gas cooker, we will make sure they understand carbon monoxide and how basically it's undetectable. So we provide alarms as well to support that. And obviously the big one, which you get asked about, is government schemes and suppliers that essentially have ways to be able to help you fund energy changes in the home. Even if it's to do with something like the Priority Service Register, where there isn't any like monetary value, but it's more about the safety and the usability of a service, all the way up to the Warm Homes Local Grant, which we'll talk about later, which can offer, thousands to someone to make an improvement in their home by switching to a renewable, for example. So one of the things that is important to consider in part of my update today is that we are now approaching winter. Winter in the terms of energy does run from the 1st of October right the way through to 31st of March, because those are our coldest months in the UK. And the biggest thing that we start to notice is that all energy services, whether it's ourselves, the NEA, CSE, it might be a local energy team, will start to get very busy at this time, because people are more thinking about their energy bills and they are physically feeling the change in the weather. One of the most important things we can do is provide energy saving devices. So what I've got on the screen here is just examples of things that we will bring with us to a home visit. This includes things like LED light bulbs, Plenty of draft proofing that can go around doors and windows, tucking radiator foils behind the radiator. We can offer door brushes that go at the bottom of the drawer, external markers that essentially make it sure that you don't have a gap for your external kind of cold coming in and your heat being lost. Same as chimney balloons, so in the middle row there, right on the very right. If you're somebody who has a nice open fire, obviously that's wonderful, but you do then fill the draft as soon as the fire is out. So these measures are all free, and we try to say to people, save money to use for essentials by getting them from us or other services that you know of. And it's quite important to think about the ways that we kind of upkeep our homes. So, for example, the draft proofing around the windowsill is something that naturally perishes after about 10 years. So you're looking to upgrade that anyway. It doesn't necessarily mean that the window was fit poorly. It doesn't even mean that the window needs changing. Sometimes we just have to do things in our own house and take control of these situations to improve that energy performance. And for example, something simple like a light bulb can then improve your energy performance certificate as well. So they do make a big change. Something to consider if you're going to think about referring to us is most of the products that you can see on screen here are semi-permanent. So if somebody's living in a rented property or a temporary accommodation, they can take them out of the home with them to their new house, and they also don't sacrifice their deposit by making any permanent changes to the home they were renting. So that's part of our standard offer. We've always had these. Things that I might not have mentioned, I'm just going to read my list very quickly. Hygrometer, so that's a humidity sensor, sometimes helps people understand where condensation's like staying, and moisture in the air since she's not being sucked out by ventilation vents or basically trickle vents. Electric blankets, which I'll talk about in a little minute. And secondary glazing film, obviously the one with the hairdryer in the middle of the screen there is actually trying to show you secondary glazing film. So this is a really interesting little measure that we all love in our team, because obviously sometimes you have houses that are a little bit older and they might have beautiful like sash windows, but they are just very cold because they're single paned. And a secondary glazing film helps to create kind of a temporary secondary glazing by adding a film with an air pocket in there. So what you do is you attach a very kind of clear sheet that you spread across the whole of the window, and you use the hot air to essentially create the pocket on the inside and then clear out any creases that might have been caused in like the installation. So it becomes an incredibly useful transparent sheet that helps to protect people from the cold a bit better. And they're removable as well. So sometimes we have people who are living in different rooms in the house might put up their secondary glazing in, say, for example, a spare bedroom, knowing that they're not going to open the windows in there for a few months, and then take it down in the summer when they want to have access again. So there's always ways to think about how we can improve the home, and these sorts of things you can buy from any kind of DIY shop really. But why we talk about them is because we try to say as a full suite, it's a nice big savings if you get them all from us. Okay, so one thing that might be important that I did sort of mention earlier is to think about if someone's a landlord and if they're looking after their tenants. There are always going to be issues when you want to make changes to the home because you have to get permissions from the right places. Shelter UK has a brilliant amount of templates, letters, which they can use, which anyone can use, essentially to make changes to the home and to write to both the landlord and the tenant about their responsibilities. But the thing to remember is anything that is integral to the house, so into the structure, the sinks and baths, the hot water, the boiler, the pipework, gas safety, that's all the responsibility of the landlord. And actually, most of them are law now. But the tenant can always have a look at the minor repairs. They can switch out light bulbs, they can check their smoke alarm batteries, they can make sure they're using things safely, keeping things clean, keeping things in a good condition. Obviously, that's ideal candidates. People want their tenants to be doing that anyway, but we help to nudge people in those areas if we feel like actually they're kind of putting a lot of onus on the landlord, but we realise that's something they could be doing as a family too, and vice versa. Sometimes a tenant is an ideal household resident, but then they're not getting a lot of support from their landlord. So we kind of help create a bit of an advocacy there. Damp and mold is the most difficult thing to determine. It's a difficult topic anyway within energy, but it always depends on where it's coming from and how it needs to be repaired. Something like, not using your trickle vents or opening up a window after bathing and cooking. It's all down to the tenant because that's down to habits and things that you can do in your house. But if you've got something like a rising damp, which is coming from a leak somewhere, or potentially because you're on some wet ground, they call it, that's not something that the tenant can reasonably fix. And it's also not something that has an appliance or even anti-mold paint can really effectively make a change to. That has to come down to kind of like the structure of the building and therefore back to the landlord, unfortunately. So sometimes it's nice to just have that clearly explained to somebody. They might come to us and say they have issues with damp and mold. What is it that they can say to their landlord to have make things changed? And that, like I said, advocacy can be invaluable as well. So I'll touch very lightly on this because obviously most people are aware of what's happening with energy price caps. I've sort of divided it into two halves. So you've got the columns on the left-hand side there are your electricity kilowatt hour, so your usage essentially, and on the right you've got the gas. Why I've put them on here is to demonstrate how much the costs of energy have changed. The blue column, the very first blue column for both electricity and gas, is showing you the pre-crisis costs. Orange is the peak of crisis, and then the final four are the most recent quarterly changes, which shows the fluctuation that we're currently experiencing. These fluctuations happen because obviously we buy and sell gas in different prices, and then that comes down to the consumer, so that's us every day. But what people really want to know is that can their habits make enough of a difference to change essentially their costs at the end of the year or end of the month. What I try to say to people is the averages that we get told in the news is not a one size fits all. This mostly applies to a very standard 3-bed house with 2 to 3 people living in it, and often a level D, so a rating of D for their EPC. As we know, every home is different and how you use your electricity is different. So sorry, electricity and gas is different. So when it comes down to usage, there is a good amount of savings to be made, but sometimes it can only go so far. So for example, if someone's got off gas, for example, they're relying on that electricity, like I mentioned earlier. To give you an idea as well of what that means for those who aren't aware, the standing charge is essentially a non-negotiable charge. You will be paying that regardless of how much you're using, even if the home is empty. There are a certain amount of tariffs that are coming into fruition around January, December time, which have no standing charges at all. But the toss up of that is they have increased then their usage charge, which then makes it a lot harder for people to, calculate what they're going to be using, because you will always have days when you need to put all your washing on at once, or when you might have days when nobody's in the house and no one's using much electricity at all. So what we've found is from looking at a lot of the kind of reports that are coming out is that they're not yet an effective alternative. So having a standing charge tariff is probably going to be better at the moment. But the same as what I showed you in the previous slide, there's been constant fluctuation, and actually, unfortunately, they have all increased and not yet come down to below pre-crisis levels. So it's important that we let people know that we're talking about energy because it directly affects us and will continue to affect us because it's now a substantial outgoing for everyone. Okay, so moving on to the parts that I think are most resolutions and solutions based. So the reason why you guys are here and what I wanted to update you on. Prepayment meter customers and those who are still using a top-up credit system, we do have access to a fuel voucher foundation and also the British Gas Energy Trust fuel voucher portal, which means that we can offer out solutions to people to essentially help them get away from self-disconnection. So anybody who uses their smartphone to top up a prepayment meter, a fob or a card, like you can see on the screen, is likely to be able to be eligible for these. They will typically top up at Payzone, Post Office, and some suppliers let them top up through their apps as well. But they're more likely to go into debt, as I mentioned, because they're paying off an existing debt usually at the same time as what they're about to use for their cooking and their heating. Self-disconnection is a complete misnomer because it sounds like it's something that is optional, which it's not. It basically means the top up has run out. Obviously, with people getting a certain amount of benefits per week, it means they can only put on to their credit to, let's say, £50, but then they could use it by using their heating very quickly. So what it essentially means is that where they have run out of that credit, they don't have access to the gas or electricity at all. So they're not able to cook, they're not able to heat the home, they don't have hot water. It can be a very severe and miserable couple of days until they're back on their feet again. So what the fuel vouchers do is they're there to keep people away from that self-disconnection phase. We can offer 3 of them across the whole of the year under the Warm Home Discount Scheme, which is UK-wide. You get £49 per voucher, and we can help you choose whether it's going to be on the electricity or on the gas, or a mix of both if we do more than one voucher. It's a very quick system. So essentially, once we've made the application, it's usually with the resident within the next 24 hours, and then they use that to top up as usual. Now, obviously, the thing that we want to talk about and make people aware of is that unfortunately, whenever schemes come up, you're always going to find someone who will try their luck and have, many applications put in, or will go to different services. I'm sure we're not the only people who are using Fuel Bank Foundation, for example, but the thing to remember is that this is a database that's kept secure, but is shared between British Gas Energy Trust and Fuel Bank, so they will know and recognise postcodes and certain last names if someone's repeat replying. So on the unfortunate side for us, sometimes it means that we bear the brunt of a bit of negativity if we say that the application has been declined. But the Green Doctors and many other services who make these applications aren't able to make the changes. We can't appeal the decision because they obviously have more data than we have. So what we try to do to kind of deter people relying on the vouchers, and also to deter people trying to get them as easy money, as it were, is we insist on a home visit first. So we want to be able to look at the home, look at the people living in there, offer long-term support or long-term debt relief, and then apply for the voucher at the same time. And then that way we have it in our minds that we're helping them get back to the route of feeling comfortable again. But that's open right the way through until March 31st. So if you are interested in putting someone to us for this, obviously please do. There's also something to consider with regards to those who are not on prepayment meters, because obviously most of us are on credit meters, which means you pay by direct debit or a receipt of bill. And we do look to work with the household support funds. I checked a couple of days ago. Obviously, Kent County Council are currently closed with their household support fund, but Medway is open, and they do have certain funds to be able to help you with food and energy. So we realise that where someone's in crisis and they want a credit meter, we'll go down that route instead. Likewise, white goods. So this is very much something that becomes more obvious the more you need it. Of course, it will always break around the time when you're about to have Christmas, but we have got access to the white goods British Gas Energy Trust Fund, same as before. In case I didn't mention it, you don't have to be a British Gas customer to be able to get a funded appliance through this scheme or a voucher. The Energy Trust is a separate charity arm from the supplier themselves, and they funded themselves through the Warm Home Discount as well. So it's just the way that we're connected to that pot of funding, essentially. So we don't necessarily raise the funder to the client because it shouldn't matter. But the White Goods Fund initiative is there to help people who are facing fuel poverty and to stop them from running up high energy bills, essentially from using inefficient products. So what they will look at is kind of like whether they're in the receipt of the warm home discount, because that's likely to have been prejudged and predetermined by their eligibility through DWP and the EPC. They will look at someone being on the priority service register. So that's a range of vulnerabilities, like I mentioned, which is just an extra service to make sure that the household needs help in times of disconnection, or if they've run out of water or electricity, for example, there's a power cut. And they ask the person who's either having a prepayment meter or indicate to be on benefits. And the benefits that they are allow are very healthy. I doubt anyone will be declined based on what we've experienced so far. But the goods that this will cover are under-the-counter fridges and freezers, combination fridge freezers, cookers for electricity only, washing machines, and tumble dryers in exceptional circumstances. They usually say that they will only receive one item per warm home discount scheme. So technically we could apply again once April hits. But that's worth knowing, because obviously white goods is often a hot topic. So if you are thinking that somebody needs one, please do send them our way and we can help with them application to that. One of the more exciting updates, which thank you, whoever just sent me that little heart, one of the more exciting updates is Hive technology. Now, this is something that is relatively new and relatively uncommon still. So a lot of people who are kind of into their tech might have started to implement this themselves because it is something that you can look into and fund. But we have luckily found that under our current main funder, who is again the British Gas Energy Trust, they will fully fund Hive technology for anybody who we see through this scheme. So for you to be aware of, our project with them runs until the 31st of March. And then our likely our third year, pardon me, will start again in July. So if you're thinking about getting somebody on the books, I suggest doing it now. And what this means essentially is that it's smart technology that helps a household become more intuitive with their energy usage. So the funding is there to help people lower their energy bills, control their heat settings, and save carbon emissions as well. There is a slightly different pack. So there's a homeowners pack where you get more things because obviously you can make a big change to your thermostat, which we need permission for. And then there's also the mobile pack for anyone who doesn't want a Hive thermostat or is living in a rented property. So to give you an example of what this means, a homeowner can receive a Hive thermostat, smart thermostatic radiator valves, the hub receives the Hive receiver, Hive hub, smart plugs and smart bulbs. And these are all things that essentially you can set up and control from a smart device. So you need to have access to a smartphone or an iPad, for example. You can then set up the device using your phone and specifically on timings. So if I speak now directly about the thermostat, for example, something that we all sort of set and leave usually, you can actually look at the program that you have on your phone. It looks very similar to the Apple clock app. And you can time essentially every single day, including the weekends, specifically to when you need it. So that can mean turning on your heating low if you're not going to be in the home, so you can avoid damp and mold or frost if we're in the depths of winter. You can make sure that the heating is on for when people get home from school, people get home from work. You can have it on all day on the Saturday and Sunday when everyone's in. And you can have it programmed in little increments, such as 15 minutes. So you can really make it tweaked essentially to your schedule, especially if you have people coming and going, if there's after school clubs or people who are going to the gym, you can then make sure that it's turned off at the right time. These little tweaks over time, they've measured and have said that on average people are saving about £175 from moving from the dumb mode to the smart technology. So the reason why we say it's there as part of our kind of offer is because there is no criteria from us. If you've had an appointment with us between now and the 31st of October, we can help that person make an application for these. And likewise, the same as things like smart plugs and smart bulbs. On and off buttons on the phone can be very helpful for some people. They have vacation modes in case you're going on holiday. Smart plugs is a brilliant thing because often we often basically turn things off and leave them on kind of standby mode. And there's lots of evidence to say that everything collectively in the house can waste a lot of money when it's left on standby. I think figures from last price cap, it was £65 per year can be wasted on old TVs just from having that red light on. So that's sometimes more than what you'd be paying to watch TV, which is crazy. So smart plugs is a brilliant way to plug your TV into that. You can then from your phone just press off and it will switch off completely, meaning you're not being charged at all. And it particularly helps with people if they've got all of their wonderful furniture set up so the plugs aren't accessible, or potentially there's mobility issues and it's hard to bend down and get behind kind of your cabinets. It's worth thinking of things like that. So that's in essence what people who are in the rented and council accommodation will get as well. The only reason we can't change the thermostat is obviously, like I said, permissions and type of boiler as well. So the app is user-friendly. The nature of the app means that most people should be confident with it if they're already using a smartphone. I've seen it myself and it is very bare bones, so it's hard to get wrong, as it were. And you can have a version which is wall mounted, for example. The Hive thermostat can be put somewhere nice and neat, so you can control it as you're coming in and out of the home as well. And it's consistent. So essentially what we try to do is make sure that people know that this app will cover all of the things that they get installed. So from our point of view, to make the application, we need to double check that the gas boiler is fully working. We need to make sure that heating controls are working before the new thermostat is installed. And unfortunately, if somebody lives in a multi-zone home where they have multiple heating systems and different thermostats, it's not likely that we would recommend Hive because we're not exactly sure at the moment how it would read between the two systems. So we would then obviously make the application to Hive with the suggestion that an engineer comes out. They need access to the internet, obviously. So you need to have data plan or Wi-Fi at home. It's helpful to have a spare socket right next to the internet router, so there's no disconnection there. And it's anybody who lives in England or Wales, considered fuel poor, but like I said, those definitions I told you right at the beginning cover quite a lot of us. So we're basically saying everyone is eligible. And essentially there needs to be a separate hot water tank in the property because it might influence what kind of pack they get. If we feel like somebody's not going to have the most benefits from the homeowner pack, we'll just provide them with the rented version. To give you an idea of what the savings are in that as well. To buy what you can see under the homeowner list, it's about £600 plus. So that's a big savings for those. And then for the rented properties, it's about £380. So we're quite grateful to have access to this kit at the moment. And there's no cut off. So however many we can put through before 31st of March, we will be doing. So to access this, you need to have a Green Doctor visit the home. Unfortunately, it can't be a remote telephone consultation with us. We'll make an application with you at the time, and then you'll have an engineer come out and fit the thermostat themselves. Everything else is very, very basic, like I mentioned. So it should be that most residents are capable of fitting these sort of items themselves, and they do come with instructions. If for any reason we quietly think that someone needs a little bit of help, we'll just arrange a follow-up and the Green Doctor will fit it instead. I'm making sure I've not missed anything else that's important here. So Hive can work with both gas and electric properties. The only people who it's not compatible with is anyone who has dry underfloor heating, storage heaters, an air source heat pump or LPG. So we'll think of other routes to support them essentially, rather than offer them the Hive technology.
Yasmin, is coming up to 2:35. You
Thank
asked
you,
me to give you
Stephen.
a little prompt.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got a couple of slides left, so that's good to have that prompt. Part of our regular service in the winter, we do have warm kits and electric blankets. I think most of you who know of Green Doctors know that this is a very welcome change as soon as the weather gets cold. So we've put in a big order for those and they'll be ready within the next couple of weeks. And what we try to do is we'll take them out to the properties with us and offer them to people who are elderly, sick for any reason, need kind of extra support keeping warm, or have young children. But what we try to make sure that they know is that all of the warm kit and power cut kits are not there to be able to substitute a good use of their main heating system. It's always more cost effective to heat the home rather than the person. With the small example of the fact that obviously if you're putting a room down to 15 degrees, another one is 7 because there's no heating in there at all, and then you're nice and warm 24 degrees, for example, in the room that you're in, going between those rooms and having such a shock to the body can cause a lot of prolonged illness in healthy people, and it can also encourage an environment of viruses, especially as we're approaching winter. That's what we want to avoid. So all of these measures are there to just help people who are finding themselves without heating for any reason, or they're having it repaired. The power cut kits offer a few things extra. So for example, the power bank and the torch might be particularly good for those who I mentioned earlier who are on prepayment meters and likely to self-disconnect. So they've got no way essentially of using energy until they top up. So those kits are worth bearing in mind. Again, all free, and we'll be taking them with us to all of our client visits. So we'll be able to determine there whether they're appropriate for receipt of them or not. A little bit of an example about electric blankets. Some people do ask how cost effective they are because obviously some people like to use them overnight. They're extremely energy efficient, especially nowadays. They're designed to warm up a space that you're in, not like the whole room. So that means that they have usually an energy rating of 100 to 300 watts, and that will amount to pennies over an extended period. So the amount of electricity consumed will sort of depend on how you use it, especially, for example, if you're putting it up to the max, which is around 56 degrees usually, then obviously you're going to cost more to run that. But if you put it down to the lowest settings, which is about 18 degrees, then that's a real savings there. Like I said, some people use them overnight for 8 hours. That's looking to be at our current price cap, so the one, well, pardon me, the one that's about to come into fruition 1st of October, is about £3.66 a year if they use it for 7 to 8 hours a night, for 3 months. So we're talking it is very, very low. In fact, the most fuel efficient electric blankets can be as little as 1p per hour. So they're very cost effective. The older style ones, which are more like the throws, which are quite power hungry, so we're looking at more like 700 watts, will be about £22 in the year. So still not a massive cost, and can really help if people are suffering with mobility, they have illness such as Raynaud's, or get colds easily. These sorts of things can really help top that up, keep them warm, keep them healthier. So it's worth mentioning. Okay, moving on to something that I think probably we're all sick to death of is scams. Energy scams are very common and they're very rife at the moment. The two that you can see on screen are examples that I personally have received in the last month. So I thought I'd make it important to screenshot them and show you essentially what we're looking at here, so how to know how to avoid them. Most common scams will include things like the solar panel funding. They'll say Ofgem Energy is offering something, energy rebates, meter changes, energy saving home improvements, all that kind of thing. And they nearly look legitimate, which makes them easy to fall for, especially for those who are not kind of digitally confident. So it's one thing to bear in mind. The reason why they can be very clever is that an EPC is publicly available. You can look up someone's EPC right now if you just go to the government website and look up your neighbour or yourself. And sometimes the scammers have used that to then target you and say, you know, we know that you're a banding of D, E, or F, so low energy retention. You're likely to be funded for X, Y, Z. Now, because they're using part truths, it does make it look more appealing. But the one thing that I personally feel like is worth mentioning now is I've never seen any scheme contact you first. If you have prompted them to reply to something that you've put in, for example, an application, perhaps you can reconsider whether that might be legitimate text. And you might even receive a letter from your own supplier, but I don't believe any scheme reaches out to us based on our eligibility as of yet. So that's really important to remember. And the fact that a scammer has access to that information does make it look more realistic, as I mentioned. So most energy rebates, such as the winter fuel payment, will be able to enrol a resident automatically, meaning that they were not unlikely to receive a text anyway. So that's something that I wanted to mention here, because that screenshot on the right there says the winter heating allowance. So just slightly named wrong, can be very misleading for somebody who is of pensioner age. Scammers can try and contact you in many ways. They might knock at the door, they might phone call, leave a letter. A lot of it is circulating on social media, including adverts and sponsored posts, which is even worse because we believe they've been vetted, but they haven't. But obviously emails, pop-ups and texts as well is what to look out for. So the main thing to consider, look for schemes that do not exist. If you've noticed that the names of the schemes are wrong, or your own names are spelt wrong, or titles, for example, like my example on the left there, they've been sent to multiple people, and actually, funnily enough, people in that chat started to reply to it and warn others that it was a scam. I don't know who these people were, but obviously they've got our numbers from somewhere. Often they'll have dodgy links and dodgy URLs, fake websites and fake email addresses. They'll ask you to complete a form, for example. They'll try and use high pressure tactics. They'll say it's urgent. They'll say the funding's running out. They'll ask for personal or financial details, which is obviously the main one that we know we don't want to give. But also sometimes the grammar can be quite wrong. There could be misspellings or strangely formatted things. This is all signs that it could be a scam. What to do as a professional. In my notes that I part of this presentation, which Stephen will help me send out later, there is an email address, report@phishing.gov.uk, and you can also forward text like this to 7726, and then they look into it for us. So my main thing is make sure you get in contact with someone legitimate. If you don't want to come to the Green Doctors to ask about energy grants, your local COB should be able to help. There should be local authority energy teams. Not all councils have them, but there often is somebody there available. Other charities who we endorse, like I've said earlier, NEA, CSE, even Energy Saving Trust can help. There's something called the Gas Safe Register for official gas engineers, and the Microgeneration Certificate Scheme, which is there for anybody who's installing renewable technology or low carbon technology. So that one is particularly worth keeping an eye on, especially if you're thinking about going for an energy grant, because they'll still have to be registered by that scheme. Okay, so on the very flip side of that, there are a lot of energy grants and schemes out there available for us to apply to. When we're doing a home visit, we can help ascertain the best route to take for a certain client, and depending on what they need and what is available for them based on their criteria. So the Warm Homes Local Grant is active. It's been running since March. You could basically put a application in, but there is a long wait time for them to get any works done. So they're saying that they're not expecting installers to start visiting homes until about mid 2026. But this is a long scheme, so get your applications in sooner rather than later. It's available for private tenants and homeowners. And again, it's there to be able to help people average out the fuel poverty gap and make sure that essentially we're getting things fitted in the home to improve its overall comfort and affordability. So the government funds this grant. It's completely funded for homeowners, and you get one free upgrade if you're a landlord, a 50% contribution to everything thereafter. And this can include things such as cavity wall insulation, solid wall, loft roof and in-roof insulation, heating controls, hot water tanks, cylinder insulation, low carbon heating and hot water, renewable energy generation such as solar panels, low energy lighting, battery storage, solar thermal, draft proofing, energy efficient doors and windows, and double glazing, for example. So that's improvement-based grants. The second part of the Warm Homes Local Grant is the actual low carbon heating alternatives. So this will be for people who are interested and want some guidance on air source heat pumps, ground horse heat pumps, any kind of shared ground loops, biomass boilers and high retention heat retention storage heaters. All of these can be funded through this scheme. So every council had to apply to be part of this scheme, because obviously the money does come from the government. In Kent and Medway, every council did, but they all got varying levels of funding. And at the moment, no one's, like I said, having any installation done, but applications are live. So we help with getting them in touch for that one. But it's worth mentioning there are other schemes available. So for example, if we realise that somebody's not going to have high success with this route, we will offer an alternative and help them down that route as well. But at the moment, the Warm Homes Local Grant is our preferred version. And it's obviously, if they're capable, we do encourage people to kind of apply for these themselves, but sometimes people just need a little bit of a nudge on what's appropriate for them, which is where the Green Doctors come into it. I'm just going to skip over my smart meters slides because I realised I've gone over time slightly. But I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that the referral details for us are on ReferKent. We welcome referrals that way. We try to aim to be in contact with someone within 3 days. We'll make sure they've got our inquiry forms and contact details if we haven't been able to get in contact with them first. But we also have our direct routes as well. And please note that voicemails are encouraged because our team are quite small. There's only 5 of us and we cover all of Kent and Medway, but we all handle the bookings. So if you leave a voicemail, we're able to get back to somebody quite quickly if we're at a home visit at the time that you call. Obviously, your referrals to us create an absolutely essential link. They're getting us in contact with people we might not physically see ourselves, but recommendation is always worth its weight in gold. So if you're thinking that any of this appealed to you today, please refer yourself and let us know that you come through to us from ReferKent. And then that way, through your experience, you can then share with guests or professionals or service users that you might know yourself.
Thank you so much for that presentation. That has been really informative. I think, is it okay for me to share your slides with everyone who's attended today?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. And especially if anyone has time, they could leave us a little review. Shameless plug. For one of the funders who lets me put together these kind of presentations. It just gives a little feedback around how we did, if you have time at the end. But the main thing to take away is the referral details. Please know that we are on ReferKent and we plan to be so forever. And the information that you've got in the presentation coming to you all from Stephen is up to date as of essentially this month. So if there's any future changes, I will drop a message to let you all know.
Okay, well, thank you very much once again.